Welcome to another episode of Your Questions Answered. Recently, ElderWatch conducted a survey on the financial habits and questions of Coloradans 50 plus. In this web series, we're going to answer some of the questions that we received. And today we'll be answering a very popular question. Should I use my 401k to fund an emergency? Today's prompt is less of a question and more of a topic for discussion. It comes to us from a non-retired 55-year-old. And they said, for the most part, your 401k is meant to stay untouched. But then every now and then, it's available as a safety net if you need it for whatever reason, rather than turning to a credit card. Now, of course, if you're already drowning in debt, credit card or otherwise, it might seem like a no-brainer to withdraw from your 401k rather than incur more debt. But you may end up paying more than you realize by making this choice, both literally and figuratively. Before we start, as a reminder, ElderWatch does not offer financial or legal advice. I also want to say you may need to withdraw from your 401k and the options that we discuss might not apply to you. If that happens, just remember to start contributing again as soon as you can once you get back on your feet so that you don't miss out on the potential gains you would have and so that you can retire on your own terms. When it comes to a 401k, a traditional 401k versus, for example, a Roth IRA, it's important to remember that generally it's pre-tax income that's going into that account. So whether you are withdrawing early, whether you're withdrawing for an emergency, or whether you're just leaving it alone, you're still going to need to pay taxes when you take the money out. Now, if you withdraw money from your 401k before age 59 and a half, the IRS usually assesses a 10% early distribution penalty. This early withdrawal penalty comes in addition to those ordinary income taxes. And on top of that, your withdrawal may also be subject to state taxes depending on where you live. All right, so at this point, maybe you're saying to yourself, well, Jess, I'm going to have to pay taxes on this now or later. 10% doesn't really seem like that big of a deal. But the problem is that you're also missing out on the interest. You're missing out on the earnings when you take money out of your 401k. So to really illustrate why you might want to consider other options or at least review all of your options before you make the decision to withdraw from your 401k, let's look at TIAA's early withdrawal calculator to really understand what that might look like. We'll go through 3 examples where each individual is looking to withdraw $10,000 from their 401k. Now, I do want to note this is a very simple calculator. It doesn't take into account some of the other details that might impact what this looks like in your real life. However, I still think it is helpful to illustrate why the choice you make today to withdraw money from your 401k might have deeper ramifications than you realized. So in our first example, let's say our individual is trying to withdraw $10,000. They are 50 years old. They plan to retire at age 68 and they make $80,000 annually and they're single. In this example, the total that this individual would receive would be approximately $6,800 despite their account now being down $10,000. Let's look at another one. In this example, let's say the individual is 57. They'll also be considering a $10,000 withdrawal. And in this scenario, they plan to retire at age 65. They make $120,000 annually and they're married, but their partner doesn't work. So the total household income is $120,000. In this scenario, they'd also receive approximately $6,800 despite their account now being down again $10,000. And in this scenario also, they might not have as much time to put that money back as that initial scenario. Let's look at one more. In this scenario, our individual is 60 years old, but they don't plan on retiring for another 10 years. Their goal is to retire at 70. They make $50,000 annually, they are married, and their total combined household income is $90,000. Now, even though this wouldn't necessarily count as an early withdrawal due to their age, they'll still have to pay taxes and they'll still miss out on the compound interest of leaving that money alone. If you're younger than 59 and a half, in some specific situations, there may be an exception to that 10% additional penalty. Some of these specific situations that may allow you to qualify for a qualified early withdrawal include birth or adoption, total and permanent disability, and disaster recovery. But this list is not exhaustive, and you can find more information on the IRS's webpage. Hardship distributions, according to the IRS, are not required, but they may be part of your retirement plan. This is when money can be withdrawn due to immediate and heavy financial need, and the amount is limited to the amount necessary to satisfy that financial need. Generally, this determination will be made by your employer. Lastly, let's talk about the rule of 55. Essentially, if you separate from your employer after age 55 and you want to withdraw from your 401k, you will be spared that 10% penalty. Now, of course, there's some more details, but definitely something worth looking into if it applies to your specific situation. And again, this is only if you separate from your employer at or after the age of 55. At this point, you might be starting to see why withdrawing from your 401k for an emergency might be more complicated than it sounds. There might be some other options that you haven't considered, so let's look into some other ideas for funding an emergency. First off, if you have one, it might make more sense for you to withdraw from your Roth IRA before withdrawing from your 401k. In part because, remember, with a Roth, you've already paid taxes on the money that goes in there. Now, depending on your situation, your age, the account itself, there might be other stipulations. One of the bigger ones is if you've had that account for less than 5 years, you might face a penalty. But generally, you can withdraw your principal from your Roth IRA whenever you want to. And by principal, I mean the original money that you put in. So for example, let's say I put $500 into a Roth IRA in 2005. At the time of this video, it's 2025, so I've had that account for 20 years, and in 2025, my $500 has turned into $15,000. Now, the $500 is the principal that generally I can withdraw whenever I want without penalty. But if I wanted to withdraw that $14,500 in earnings, depending on my age, I may face some penalties. Another idea is that if you have it, consider withdrawing from another savings account first. If you have a high yield savings account or a health related savings account like an FSA or an HSA, or an individual non-retirement investing portfolio, you may want to consider taking from these accounts first, as you'll generally face less in fees. In our initial prompt, the respondent suggested that they use their 401k for emergencies rather than using a credit card. And again, this might be very tempting, but it's really important that you compare those interest rates and the penalties you might incur if you choose to go the route of using your 401k as a safety net. So I made up a very quick little table. Let's look at and compare what this might look like if we are trying to withdraw $10,000 from our 401k. So as shown on that early retirement calculator, if we try to withdraw $10,000 in this scenario, I'm pretending that we are that 50-year-old who makes $80,000 annually and they're single. The amount that we're going to receive is $6,800, which means that we paid 32% in taxes and fees, and or we paid $3,200, right, to cover those things. Let's say, for example, instead that they decide to look at opening a new credit card and they, again, need $10,000. In this scenario, let's say that the interest rate on that credit card is 20%. So long as they pay their bills on time, they're only looking to pay an additional $2,000. Now, let's say that they instead decide to look at a personal loan. And again, this personal loan is going to be for $10,000. But in this situation, it is a 12% interest rate. So at the end of the day, they'll have paid an extra $1,200. As you can see, we wound up paying the most and receiving the least when we do that early withdrawal. However, you might be saying, okay, Jess, well, I'd rather receive less money than take on additional debt, which is fair, but Just remember that instead of making an extra payment now, when you withdraw from your 401k, you're not only paying in the present, but you're also losing out on the potential compound interest as well as any earnings from being in the market. Now, at this point, you might be saying, well, Jess, I wish that I had another savings account, but I don't. I don't have a Roth IRA. I don't have a savings account, and I really can't take on any more debt. I cannot afford another monthly payment, in which case I understand. And you may have to use your 401k to finance an emergency. The good news is that once you get back on your feet, you might be able to play catch up. So if you are under age 50, you are limited to the amount of money you can put into your 401k, and you're limited to $23,500 annually. However, between ages 50 and 59, as well as ages 64 and up, you can contribute an extra $7,500, bringing your total contribution limit up to $31,000. Between ages 60 and 63, there's something called a super catch-up. And in this time period, you can contribute an additional $11,250 on top of that standard 401k contribution limit. So that means you can contribute a total of $34,750. And that's a wrap for today. Facing a financial emergency is never fun or easy, but there might be more than you realize when it comes to considering an early withdrawal from your 401k. And I hope that this presentation has given you a little bit more food for thought on that nuance and how it might be a short-term solution that really has a long-term impact. I've mentioned them before, but if you need free one-on-one financial coaching, especially if you've, for example, had to withdraw from your 401k and you need help rebuilding after, consider contacting a financial coach. And in Denver, there is a free financial coaching program called the Financial Empowerment Center. This organization serves Denver County and a few surrounding areas, but there are many similar programs throughout the state of Colorado. Until next time, my name is Jessica Zawadsky. I am the program specialist for ElderWatch Colorado, and I look forward to answering more of your financial questions.